If you're not familiar with me, hello, I'm Christy Noel. I'm a career expert and author of 2 career books that provides all sorts of tips and stories related to some of the things that I've learned. My career, Michelle and Dana are both contributing authors of Your Personal Career Coach. So happy to share my experiences with job seekers, people looking to get ahead, managers to help them further their career. Michelle Lando is the founder of Write Style. She's a professional resume writer. And Dana Levy-Dietrich is the founder of Brooklyn Resume Studio. She's also a professional resume writer and career consultant. And Jessica Williams is the CEO of JMW Consulting. She's a hiring expert and career consultant and also works on resumes. So as you can see, I am an extremely great company as far as the panel of people to help you with your revamping your resume. Ooh, why am I going the wrong way? That's not good. So first of all, I'm going to be the one to give you the cold, hard truth of why the resume is the most important part of your job and why you really need to make sure you have an effective resume. Because I've said this, and if you got my email, if your resume is not effective, you'll never get, and by effective, I mean doing its job to get you the interview. So it needs to be compelling enough and interesting enough and highlight all of your successes, your skills, your background so that somebody wants to interview you. And if it doesn't do that, you're never going to get an interview. It doesn't matter if you send 100. If it doesn't work, the numbers games won't work for you. So you have to make sure you've got what recruiting managers and hiring managers are on the resume so that they want to give you a call. They want to give you an interview. So I know some of you are really frustrated and you're thinking nobody's hiring right now because I'm not getting interviews. And people are hiring. Yes, it's a very difficult job market and it's not as easy to get those interviews, but they are hiring and they are interviewing. So if you're not hearing anything, some of it might be asking the tough question is my resume, being effective enough? Or maybe I need to take a step back and really dig in and figure out why it's not. And that's why we're here today. So we're going to help you. Darn it. I don't know what's going on there. Anyway, some stats again of why this is important to make sure you really have an effective resume is that, and this stat is from before COVID, 250 resumes are submitted for each job. And I'm sure that number is higher now because of the challenging job market. So those are a lot of resumes that a hiring manager is going through to get to yours. So you really need to make sure that it is going to be noticed when you're competing against that number of resumes. I know a lot of you submitted questions already about the ATS. And for good reason, because 98% of Fortune 500 companies are using the applicant tracking system. And if you're not familiar with that, that's the scanning system that's a computer that will look at your resume before a human ever does. So you have to make sure that your resume not only looks good for a human, but it also is going to work for an ATS system so it can get past that to get to the human. And then, excuse me, 7.4 seconds is how long a recruiter will spend on the first review of your resume. So you don't have that much time to be able to have somebody see that resume or to grab their attention. So you have to make sure it, makes an impact almost immediately. So again, I'm going to let the experts do their job and tell you everything that you need to know about your resume and turn it over to Jessica Williams, who's going to talk about resume snatching strategies.
Thank you so much. Depending where you are, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, beautiful job snatchers. I'm super excited to give you these resume snatching strategies because I want you to go out there and grab the job that you want. So first, I'll start with creating an easily digestible resume. This is what I mean. As a person who reads resumes, I have a short attention span. So you have 6 to 7 seconds to catch my attention. My eyes are geared for bolded figures, bullet points, and different areas that I can easily scan and see. So you should be able to pull my attention from those things. And I need you to be okay with removing information that you no longer need on your resume. Take a deep breath and let it go. We get so attached to our content and our background that it's like we're fighting ourselves to make sure that we let people see everything we've done. The cool thing is, once you get your resume to be digestible, you can give us all the fun facts during your interview. But paper-wise, give me the hard, cold facts. Give me your improvements, your impacts, and your highlights. Grab my attention quick, fast, and in a hurry. So I'm going to show you a resume don't. I even hate to say it that way. So I'll wait for the slide to go over for the resume don't, so I can show you what areas that you can easily cut out.
Sorry, I am having trouble. Oh, there we go.
Oh, no, you're all good. Awesome sauce. Okay, so if you'll notice, I put this resume up because there's a couple of areas I want you to pay attention to. Your contact information. Keep everything in one slice, one side, same side. Give me your first and last name, your city or state. Make sure your location is relative to where you're applying. If you're looking for remote roles, it's okay to say remote ready. Let people know that you're here and you're ready to grab that remote role. Your phone number, your email, and I'm super, super sad that the LinkedIn isn't on there. People want to look for you. So make sure that we're not missing that. So if you scroll down, the one thing I noticed is there's no summary. I need a career authentic summary to bring me in. Get my buy-in. We're missing. We're missing that. So that's kind of a big factor. And then your career section. Great. I love bullet points because I'm not going to read everything, but I will read what's in a bullet point because I know that you want me to pay attention to it. There's no bullet points. Your skills should be in the beginning 1/3, because if I am a super busy resume reader, I'm not going to get all the way to the end of your resume. So give me your power punch in the beginning 1/3. Don't make me search for it. And especially if you have important skills that are relative to my job description, don't leave them at the bottom. I need to see that at the top. Snatch my attention. Snatch my buy-in. So make sure you pay attention to all the spacing as well. There's a lot of white space. That can be used for you. Use that white space. Don't think because you have your education and skill sections super big that it's making a big difference. It's okay to take up real estate on your resume paper. So the next slide will show you guys my ideal landscape for a resume and the most success that I've gotten as I've written resumes for other professionals. If you'll notice, the contact information, boom, right in your face. You can't miss it. So now you know to click on my LinkedIn, you know my name, and you know where to call me. Quick, fast, and in a hurry. I always believe in an authentic career summary. Please do not forget to let me know who you are, how you're going to shake up my company, and what value you're going to make as an addition to the role. That's it. Clean, crisp, and concise. That I can review in 6 to 7 seconds. Next, resume myths. Here we go. People think that you have to have your entire background of what you've done throughout your entire life on your resume. No, give me your last 10 to 12 years. Anything else we can talk about during your interview. You do not want to drag on your resume. I've seen resumes 10 pages. I've seen resumes 6 pages. I guarantee I'm not going to make it that far. Give me a strong 2 to 3 pages if you have quality content. That's it. No, it doesn't have to be 1 page. But if it's not quality content, make it a 1-page hitter quitter. Give me everything you've got to pull me in, to give me your buy-in. Okay? And the other resume myth that I want to clear up is that you can't use a splash of color. Use some color. Everybody's resume is black and white. You're in a stack. How are you going to stand out in that stack? Sprinkle your own magic, add your own color, nothing wild. Make sure to stay in the realm of your industry. If you're in a creative industry, by all means, have a blast. Corporate, let's use blues, grays, greens. I like a money green, so green works as well. So remove yourself from those old school stigmas. And then best method to make your resume visible, always apply through the website, but follow up on LinkedIn. Reach out to those people who are associated and send them your resume with a kind note. That's the only way to really stand up and stand out. You're going to go in with a stack of people. Make yourself that highlight. Sprinkle your own magic, make it a polite, pleasant, and direct message, and go from there. That's it. That's me. That's how you're going to snatch your resume.
Thank you, Jessica. I really appreciate that. That was great advice. I don't know if everybody can see me, guys, but I'm nodding my head while she's talking. A couple of things I forgot to mention, my bad. If you're on live with us at the end, stay with us because we have some giveaways. And yes, this recording and the slide deck will be sent out after the fact so that you can reference it again and hear all these great tips at your leisure over the weekend and take a look at the slide deck as well. So now I want to introduce Michelle Lando. As I said, she's the founder of Right Styles. She's also contributing author of Your Personal Career Coach. And she's going to give you some great advice about knowing what to include in your resume and what to take off and when to take it off. Michelle.
Hi, everyone. So first off, I loved what Jessica said about leaving certain information off of your resume and how she talked about that everyone is really tied to our own content. And I think that's a really good point because we all feel like everything we've ever done is really important. And it is important to your story, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's important to your resume and the point that you're trying to get across. So it's really important when you are considering what information to include on a resume and what information to leave off to consider what kind of position that you're interested in applying for. So, we have some content. I think that's going to come up momentarily. But first off, you want to, as far as leaving on your resume, simple, easy to read font, again, no problem with color, but you really want to make sure that your resume is easy to read. So if you're putting on this cursive, tiny or different kind of font that's going to be hard for an applicant tracking system to read, but also just a person to read, it's not going to be super beneficial to you. You definitely want to include your education level on your resume. So your degree, your major, certifications, specialized training, anytime that you have taken it upon yourself to further your career and further your knowledge in a certain skill, whether that's an online tutorial, a class at a college, anything like that, a certification that you've gotten through work, that's something that you can include on your resume. Definitely keywords and phrases from the job description you're applying to. So if you are not using the job description that you're interested in applying to write your resume or to edit your resume, you are doing yourself a disservice. So I started my career in recruiting and I worked for a small boutique recruiting company, but even there we had hundreds of resumes come through. And so I can only speak for myself, but in my experience, when I was getting hundreds of resumes come through, I would do a quick keyword search to see if they had a few of the key skills or the software that we needed for this role. And if they had those skills, if they had that software integrated on their resume, fantastic. I'd put them in a pile that when I have some time, I'd actually review the resume. But if those skills or that software that we needed, that was a must for the job, was not listed on the resume anywhere, then I didn't even bother spending time looking at the document. So it is really important when you are writing a resume that you are using the job description to your advantage. They're giving you bits and pieces of information that they're looking for. And if you're not using it, it's not to say that you can't ever get a job, but your resume just isn't going to be super effective. And then finally, we want to talk about specific metrics and achievements that highlight your value as a candidate. So anyone can say that they're good at their job, but very few people can actually show it. So when you're applying for a job, yes, you want to make sure you have the keywords, you want to make sure that you have the right skills listed in your resume so that someone can see how you align with the job. But ultimately, you want to make sure that someone can look at your document and say, look at what this person accomplished in this role. That means they can do this or something similar for us. So you want them to be able to see quick metrics and achievements, pull out numbers. The eye is drawn to numbers, bullets, all of that. So anytime you can say, increase sales by 30% or reduce costs by $20,000, whatever that is, anytime you can pull out, integrate those specific facts and achievements, you definitely want to do that. And then what to leave off your resume. We could talk about this for a very long time. This is just kind of a short and condensed list. But again, just like I mentioned, those difficult to read fonts. If someone has to work really hard at pulling out information on your resume, they're not going to spend the time. You are not that special. You are very special. You are important, but you're not worth hours or even minutes of someone's time when there's hundreds of resumes to go through. They're just not going to sit and try to decipher that text. Coursework that is no longer relevant. So this is something really important. I know that I think a couple of you said that you're recent graduates. Coursework is a really great way to integrate information if you don't have a ton of work experience or if you're trying to transition into a different area or career. Coursework, whether that's college coursework or certification, specialized training, that's a really great way to integrate keywords in there. But I do see quite a few people that come to me that have been in college, 10, 15 years ago, and they still have their college classes listed on there. That's often not super beneficial. And again, it really depends on what you studied, where you're trying to go in your career. Again, if it's relevant, if it can show your knowledge and integrate those keywords that you need, that's great. But if it's just there to show that you took them way back when, especially, it's not going to be super beneficial, and you could better utilize that space by integrating specific metrics and achievements. And so general job descriptions that have been copied and pasted from the internet. This is something super important. If you can Google your job description and you're just going to copy and paste that and put that on your resume, it's not going to do a whole lot for you. And more often than not, the person reading your resume will probably be able to tell that it's just like a general job description that you didn't put much thought into. So you really want to make sure that you're putting thought into your resume and into your job description. So how did you go above and beyond your role? Or great, did you manage accounts? Fantastic. What accounts did you manage? What were they valued at? Either dollar amount, what did they contribute to the team? What did you do? And then job descriptions that have been copied and pasted from a coworker's resume. When I write resumes, people sometimes send me, oh, this is my coworker's resume. I did the same thing as this person. Okay, so you might have had a similar role. You might have had the same role, but I guarantee you that you haven't had the exact same metrics and achievements. And someone shouldn't be able to, put their name on your resume or vice versa. If you're doing that, your resume isn't articulating all that you have to offer. You really want to discuss who you are as a candidate, why you are worth hiring, and what you have done. So if you're taking information, it's not to say you can't use a coworker's resume for inspiration or see how they word something. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you are taking the exact same job description and just copying and pasting it onto your document, A, that's not really fair to them. They're the one that's put in the work. But also, it's just not, highlighting your uniqueness and your specialty. And then one other thing that I always want to touch on is education. This is just my personal preference. I would love to get anyone else's experience or thoughts on that, any of the other experts, but I never actually include dates of education on a resume unless someone is currently in school, like a entry-level job. They're in school, going to finish it, or they're just out of school looking for their first job, or if they are, they went back for a degree and they're in progress, it's going to finish in a few months or something like that. But in my experience, including the dates of education on your resume can work against you in two ways, because if you have a very old, it's been 10, 15, 20, 30 years since you've been in school, it can make you appear too experienced for a role. And sometimes if you are just out of school, it can actually, make you look more inexperienced than you actually are. So again, if you're applying for your first job, it is beneficial to include that date on there so people can see, okay, this person doesn't have a ton of work experience because they are just out of school. However, typically it's something that I leave off of a resume. And then I think we're going to go next on to the next slide will come up. How to integrate metrics and achievements on your resume. So I touched on this briefly, but again, I said this before, I'll say it again, I say it to everyone. Anyone can say that they're good at their job. Anyone can say, I'm a great salesperson. Well, awesome. Tell me what you've done. Tell me about your sales. The first time anyone, or the minute someone says to me, I'm really good at sales, my question is, okay, what have you done? Tell me about what you've accomplished. So that's really important. So instead of writing something like responsible for managing accounts, we want to say something along the lines of, and again, these are just ideas for you to work with. This is what you should be saying. But write something along the lines with liaise with regional counterparts and manage corporate accounts, including X, Y, and Z. You can talk about your account names, especially if you're working with big brands or notable accounts. Something like effective leader who can lead productive teams. Okay, that's fine. But instead of doing that, why don't we change it into something with an action verb? Instead of the ability to lead productive teams, we led a cross-functional team of 25, achieved 138% of team sales goal, and coached 3 junior staff to become managers within 1 year. Something like this, a sentence like this, it's an action verb. It's something you led a cross-functional team. It shows the scope of your work, how many people you've managed. It shows an accomplishment. You achieved 138% of a team sales goal, and that you coached 3 junior staff to become managers within 1 year. There are a lot of key factors in there that make that sentence a lot more effective than just saying you're an effective leader. And then the last one, provide team oversight on workflow, resource allocation, and project management. That sentence, it does include some keywords depending on the job that you're interested in, project management, resource allocation, depending on what kind of job you're interested in applying for. But something along the lines of managed a team of 40 and led monthly training seminars, which enable the team to execute projects more effectively with a 30% faster timeline. Great. Something like this now shows, again, that you managed even a bigger team, a team of 40, that you led monthly training seminars, so your ability to lead and develop these training seminars, and what that resulted in. It enabled the team to execute projects faster, and then you're giving a metric, so with a 30% faster timeline. So information like this will really make your document more effective when someone is reading it, and it makes it a lot more unique to you and not just a general resume. And then we can move on to the next slide. And so when to take something off of your resume. This is really important. Again, we all are tied to our history, and that's great. But you really want to make sure that every single thing on your resume serves a purpose. The real estate on your resume is very valuable. You only have a certain amount of space. You don't have to have a 1-page resume, but I typically don't like to have a resume longer than 2 pages. Something like you can have one, and especially if you're in a CV, if you're in academia, if you're in science, if you're including research publications, a document like that, that's something a little bit different. But for the masses, for the general rule of thumb, most people don't need a document longer than 2 pages. This is, again, my preference. I typically tell people, if you can get everything on 1 page in a clean, easy to read format, great. That, the less fluff you have, the less you have to force someone to read, the better. But again, if you need that extra real estate, use it. Just make sure that every single thing on your resume serves a purpose. So if you started your career in sales, but then you decided to go back to school and go into, computer science. Okay, that's fine. Depending on how long, there's nothing wrong with transitioning careers. Depending on how long you were in your career, you can't erase your career. That's not something that you want to do. I always tell everyone, your history is your history. You're not going to change that, but you want to make sure and highlight the right information. So if you have 20 years of experience in sales, and then you went back and you have now 10 years of experience in computer science, then you probably don't need to include the 20 prior years in sales if you're focusing on the computer science sector now. If it was in a different lifetime, same thing. If you have a whole prior career that you did, that's probably not something that you really need to include on a resume. Typically, you want to go back about 10 to 12 years. You can go back farther a little bit if you have something specific that you need to highlight, or you could always do prior experience with, a specific skill or with a company, but you really want to focus on what you want to highlight, what you want people to see about your resume, and where you're trying to go in the future. So how you're trying to take your career, propel your career forward, and make sure that your resume focuses on that experience. And so if it makes you seem less experienced or too experienced, and this is really important to focus on because, I have a lot of people that maybe have 5+ years of experience out of college, and they're still including their internships on their resume. And potentially, that could help you depending on what kind of job you're trying to get into going forward. However, if you have, 5+ years experience and you've actually made a lot of progress in your career, if you've had promotions, if you've taken on, big roles, if you've taken on big accounts, you might have all of the experience to move forward and move up into this next position and this next, level of your career. But if someone sees an internship on there, it might make you seem too green. And then in the same sense, if you have 30 years of experience, but you're trying to, switch careers or switch roles, you may not want to include all of those 30 years. If you've been at the same company, then it may potentially be worthwhile to include that, but you don't want something on your resume that someone's either going to look and say, oh, this person's been in the career or in the field for so long that they might not know how to use this new technology, or vice versa. This person hasn't been in this field long enough. There's nothing wrong with highlighting what you have to offer, but you just want to make sure that everything is relevant to the kind of jobs that you're interested in applying for. I think that's what I have. I'm happy to answer any questions at the end or anything about that, but I'm going to pass it on to the next person.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. That was really fabulous, and loved all of the straightforward information of how to address how long your resume should be, how much information to be in, things like that. And I know a lot of the questions we've had gotten in the past and today and leading up to today was about career changing. So how do I position my resume to change careers, especially for those of you who may be in an industry that is downsizing as a result of COVID and need to find a job in a totally different industry, or maybe you're just ready for a different type of role completely. So Dana Levy-Dietrich is going to provide you guys some great advice and tips on how to address that part of your resume. So Dana, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Christy. Okay. Hey, everyone. I wanted to throw out 3 quick things here, just for anyone who might be feeling kind of discouraged or overwhelmed in their job search before we jump into this. And one real quick is just, if you are overwhelmed, start with the resume. This is all really great advice. You can't get too far in your job search unless you get your resume in order. So if you're overwhelmed, don't know where to start there. The second thing I want to mention too, hopefully to motivate you, is that, as Christy said, places are hiring. I'm seeing it in my own clients, but some industries more than others, but there is hiring happening. And the third is, it's possible to change careers right now. It's actually a very big population of the clients that I work with. So I see them doing it every day, and it really just comes down to having a solid resume that can speak to that. So that's what we're going to go through. Relevance is really key. So if you are thinking about making a career change, it's going to be a little bit of a different approach to your resume. First and foremost, you want to know what you're going after. It's not quite enough to say, I want to do something more creative. Get, the exact job title in mind, if you can, or industry or type of company. Sometimes people say, I want to get into tech, or I want to get into the nonprofit space. So get as clear and specific as you can in terms of job titles, in terms of companies and industries that interest you. And that's going to help you guide your search the more specific that you get. Okay. Next bullet point. So one of the challenges, obviously, with changing careers is looking at where there might be gaps in your skills, in your experience, right? If you're changing careers, chances are you may have not done that job before. So looking at that, what are the necessary skills that you need to do the job? The best place to look is obviously the job description. What are really, the way that they usually write out a job description, the core criteria is at the top. The most important things are going to be listed first. So kind of use that as a guide. What are the skills you need to know, whether it's something hands-on, whether it's a software, and then look for any opportunities where you can fill that gap. If you want to, go into something a little more digitally focused, are you up to date on the technologies that role would require? If it's a different industry, is there something you can do to learn about either that segment, that customer? So identify what the gaps are, and then look at opportunities where you can bridge those either through training or other means. Okay, next. Huge thing with changing careers is to focus on your transferable skills. So if you're not quite sure what that means, and I'm going to show some examples of those in a second, transferable skills are, skills that are not necessarily industry specific, more like functions that can be applied from one industry to another. So they might be industry specific, but it's something maybe like relationship building, sales in some case, marketing, leadership, writing, things that aren't necessarily tied to one industry that you could bring over and apply value in another space. And they could be hard skills, like I said, the functions of your job day to day, or soft skills that are more like personal attributes, again, leadership, teamwork, listening, work ethic, ability to function in a startup environment, for example. Those are all kind of more soft skills or attributes. I just want to go back to one thing. There was one of the bullets was personal interest or experience. You can make a career change that's kind of led by something that maybe you don't have any professional background in, but you have a personal interest or history. I often have people who are, athletes, or maybe that, avid marathon runners, and they want to go into something that's a little bit more sports and athletic focused, or maybe they've really been into music their whole lives, or beauty is another one often. So maybe there's something in your personal history, whether you're really knowledgeable about a certain product or sector. That's something that you can kind of weave into the resume and your personal story to, again, try to fill that gap if you don't have hands-on experience. Okay, next one. So writing a resume for a career change is a little bit different approach than, again, just kind of going back and saying, here's what I did, here were the outcomes of that. You kind of have to think most about what's going to be relevant. And this is really, your chance to rebrand yourself. Jessica mentioned the importance of the summary statement a few minutes back, and I think that's so critical on a resume because it's the first couple of sentences, couple of bullet points that someone's going to read about you. And it's really your opportunity to kind of set the stage for the document. So that's one way to rebrand yourself and then kind of carry that through the rest of the resume. And that's really what the resume is. It's your narrative, it's your story, it's your pitch around who you are and what you've done. And as Jessica and Michelle both mentioned, it doesn't have to include everything you've done, right? Focus on relevance over detail. You don't have to include every job you've had, and even within your most recent work, you don't have to include every task, every function, even every accomplishment. Again, try to think about what's going to be what you've done in your current and previous roles that's going to be most relevant to the type of work that you want to be doing. So another good tip is to create a targeted cover letter. Use that to your advantage. Cover letter, I am going to caution you, they don't always get read. So I always try to tell clients, do what you can to make the resume stand on its own as much as possible. But you can definitely use the cover letter to touch on things or expand on things that are tough to talk about in the resume. And again, more on the personal end. Use that space, don't reiterate necessarily what's in the resume in terms of your history, but use the cover letter to talk more about, your personal journey and, why do you want to work for that company? Why are you interested and qualified uniquely for, that particular role? But also, why are you interested in making that shift and what can you bring over that's going to hold value for the company. So you can talk about why you're making that transition in the cover letter. And by the way, that might stem from the fact that you come from a history in hospitality or travel, and right now it's challenging to find a job. I mean, that is a perfectly fine thing to address in the cover letter. You know, that's part of the story that you're telling. So think about how you want to position that narrative, and that's something that you could really expand upon in the cover letter. And then, as we mentioned, you know, highlight those transferable skills or relevant experience. Look again, you know, what gaps exist and what skills have you amassed in your current career that maybe you can bring over into that new space or into that new company or job that you're targeting that's still going to add value. Even if you don't have maybe one or two of the core criteria, is there something else that you can bring into that role, you know, as a non-traditional candidate that's still going to add value and, you know, position you as somebody who can do the job effectively? Okay, go ahead, Christy. So these are just some examples of transferable skills. So if you're writing a resume, like these are the kinds of things you want to highlight. Think about peppering, you know, your transferable skills into your summary section. If you have a skills section, like Jessica mentioned, you know, boost that up on the resume, bring it up top and highlight these things, not just to draw attention to them, but also for keyword purposes. Those are going to be important. So I pulled out some of these here. Again, you can kind of see how some of these things are not specific to one industry. And, you know, if you can build relationships in sales, you can build relationships in the creative industry, in finance, in nonprofit. You can manage people across a lot of different sectors. You can create presentations and, you know, have effective public speaking skills in really any industry. So again, looking at how can these skills help you bridge that gap into a new industry. And that's really a big focus of what the resume should be about. Okay. There's so much I can say about career changing on a resume, but as I mentioned, again, relevance, transferable skills, and looking at where the gaps exist that you can address. So on that, I will turn it back to Christy.
Thank you, Dana. I know that that's a lot of people are in that situation right now are trying to change careers. So we really appreciate all that great information that you provided. We are going to transition to the Q&A section right now. So if you have questions that you haven't submitted already, please take this opportunity to do that. In addition, we have our drawing coming up. So in order to make sure that you guys are entered, if you want to, if you'll send a chat to Lianka and let her know if you're interested in winning the resume review and consult with Michelle Lando. So thank you, Michelle, for offering that up. And also, I'm going to send out autographed copies of both my books. So if you're interested in either one or the other, chat Lianka Lyon so that you can be entered, and then we will draw some names at the end. So right now, I'm going to jump into some of the questions that we got beforehand because they were great. And then I'm going to open it up to the panel to jump into to answer them. Kyle has not a lot of work experience, so he wants to know what's the best way to develop a resume without a lot, I guess for going for your first job or just out of college.
Do we know who wants to answer that?
I think you do, Michelle.
Yeah, I mean, I just didn't want to go over anyone. But no, I think what's really important when you are, you know, applying for your first job out of school is consider the non-traditional work experience. One of the things that I always tell recent graduates or students is that you have a ton of experience. You have a ton of non-traditional work experience. So you may not have that typical 9-to-5 corporate job, but consider, you know, coursework that you've done. This is one of those times that you definitely want to highlight the coursework. If you have done, say you're applying for a marketing job and you have done market research in your marketing class, or you put together an analysis or, you know, a competitive marketing plan for a company, especially if it's a real company, that's definitely something that you can include on your resume. So how I do that, and again, one thing that I want to note before we all jump in and start answering these questions are, at the end of the day, yes, we all have feedback. We all have the general consensus about what should be on a resume, but resumes are very subjective. And so it's okay to have, slightly different views, and everyone's going to write a resume slightly differently. So also consider that. But how I do it when I want to add a class project is I will put like the university as the company name, and then again, using marketing for the example, say student marketing analyst or something like that. And then I'll talk about the class project. So, built a comprehensive marketing plan for Walmart or whatever it is that you did, show what you analyzed, show what you found, and talk about your recommendations. Another great thing to include would be volunteer work. Volunteer work is a really great way to show that you have connected with the community, that you have experience working with others, and then you never know what kind of talking point that could give someone. So I would just, again, consider all that you've done past just that traditional corporate job.
So Michelle, one of the questions that just came in was exactly about volunteer work. And the question was, how can they add that to their resume? Do they add that just like they would a normal job?
Yeah, there are a couple different ways that you can do it. If you have a really solid career path, especially if you have a very linear career path and you just want to include the volunteer work, you just want to note it as a talking point, you could put it under either a volunteer or a professional, an affiliation, something like that towards either the bottom of your resume, something like that. Again, just if you want to make it a talking point. If you want to utilize that to add bulk to your experience, I would add that in as a job description, talk about what you've done. And then you can just say, whatever, if it's Feeding America volunteer, you can talk about what you've done there, how you've contributed to the team. But again, it depends, at least how I see it, is it depends on how you want to utilize that experience.
I would love to jump in because I think you're so right. And then for clients who have really focused on giving back to the community, you want to highlight your community engagement in the beginning, especially if you're lacking that career experience, right? But if you've done a lot of community engagement, put it at the beginning 1/3. But like Michelle said, if it's just a talking point, definitely add it at the bottom. But if you are trying to showcase what you've done, how you've shaped your community within your parameter, then you definitely want to add it and make sure you talk about what you've done. Michelle did a beautiful job of communicating that. Tell us what you've done. Don't just tell me, you've walked miles for the cause of diabetes, but what else did you do? How else have you impacted and raised money for these different causes and changed the volunteer aspect? That's all I got. Sorry.
No, that's great.
Dana, I'm going to throw this one to you, and then Jessica and Michelle, if you have anything to add. I've seen a couple questions come in. I'm sorry, I missed the names, but their relevant experience was 20 plus years ago. So obviously we don't say you want to have that experience brought up to the front. So how can they do that? Because a lot of times we say don't put experience on that's old, that far back, but that's what they're either going back into. How do they address that?
Loring asked I want to use this question as an example of this because I think it's a good example. Loring mentioned having done PR, editing, proofreading 30 years back. It's going to be very hard to sell that as relevant, having been that far back in terms of the experience. Instead, what I would do, if the experience is that far back that maybe you don't want to highlight it, I would talk about it more instead of skills. Like maybe, you don't show it as you have experience doing it at this point in your career, but you have those skills that you can bring. And then what can you do right now to maybe take on some work and more practice in that space, whether it's a course or some outside projects, things like that. The other option is you could include that experience on the resume and maybe place it under, say, like a prior experience section where you list it out without dates. The only thing with that is be prepared to speak in the interview to when that was, because they'll touch upon it. So I would say, if possible, shift it so that you're talking about that experience in the summary, in the skills section, as far as, these are my strengths, these are my skill sets. And then, like I said, anything that you can do right now to kind of weave that into your experience, I think is going to be easier than trying to sell experience that's, 15, 20 plus years back.
If I could pop in, I was going to say everything that she said. But just to pop in on that, this is a great opportunity to use this is typically how I write a resume, but more of a hybrid style of a resume instead of just that reverse chronological. Mm-hmm. So again, those skills at the top, that's really where you can integrate all of those proofreading, the PR skills, or editing, proofreading, all of that. But using Lauren's experience as an example, if you're running a business, you're probably doing some form of editing and proofreading throughout that. So I would just try also, in addition to making sure and highlighting those skills towards the top, is really think about how that was integrated into your most recent experience, because more often than not, especially if something is second nature to you, you are probably doing it more often than you really consider, even if it's not the bulk of your job. So I would try to take a step back and really, evaluate where you have worked on that, because you probably have a lot of recent experience to integrate. And then again, focusing on that skill set towards the top third of the document, that'll really help you.
I have a lot of questions that came in before the workshop today. Saptarshi, Sean, Daniel, Pat, they all asked about ATS and getting past the bots. So I know you guys all have opinions on what to do to be noticed by the screening ATS.
So I'm going to say first, ATS suck. Like, there's no way around it. It is not our favorite thing, but you have to pay attention to your job description that you are applying for. That's why a lot of us will tell you to make sure you are reading the job description. I tell people, take it old school, pull out your highlighter, print that job description, go through and look for the highlighted keywords. Those keywords and phrases need to be in your resume, because when they scan it, they're going to strip your resume anyway, and they're pinging for keywords. If you don't have the amount of keywords in that document, you're out. But that's also why you follow up. Just throwing that out there. Take it old school. Oops, okay. Sorry. Just wrapping it up. Take it old school, grab a highlighter, go through that job description, pull out the keywords. It sucks. It's a time-consuming process, but you have to do it.
I love that. I was going to say one good tool is something called Job Scan. Just Google it. Yeah. It's not bulletproof, beware, but it's meant to kind of mimic the ATS. And what it does, you can go on, get a couple of free scans. You can sign up. It's something like a couple bucks a month. But Job Scan, JOBSCAN, and you can plug in your resume. First of all, it will convert it. So you'll see if there are any issues with ATS when it parses it. But then you can also upload a job description or paste it. And what it will do is compare your resume against the job description. Jessica mentioned, pull out all the keywords. Again, it's going to pull out some things that aren't relevant, but it will at least show you like how much the core keywords are coming out in your resume and maybe where it's missing some things. So that's a good tool as well to cross-reference.
Yeah, and one thing I really want to note, and I cannot stress this enough, there is no way to have one perfect resume for every job. It is impossible. Any online tool, good or not, that is going to sit there and tell you that they can create one resume that's going to beat all the algorithms, they're not telling you the truth. I mean, I have people come to me all the time and they're like, oh, well, this company, this online thing says that they're going to create me a resume that's going to work for everything. There's not a way to have that. Every single job has different keywords, even if it's a similar role. You should be able to have, and this is what I tell people all the time, you should be able to have a foundational resume to work for, geared towards the kind of jobs you're interested in. However, if you're not sitting and taking note of the actual keywords listed in the specific job you're applying for, your resume isn't going to be super effective. So the example that I always use is management versus leadership. You could have 20 years of management experience, 20 years managing, teams, whatever that is. But if they happen to use, they're looking for a team leader and they're looking for 20 years of experience leading teams, it's not to say that you can't do the job. But if they type in leadership or leader instead of manager and management, then you may not come up on the applicant tracking system. So it's just really important to make sure that you're doing this for every job. Yes, it's a pain. No one wants to be doing it, but that's the cold, hard truth that you just can't have one resume for everything. You can, but you're going to have trouble with the online applications.
Jessica, can you really quickly just follow up with the following up on LinkedIn? I know we talked about it on the last webinar, but can you just really quickly kind of touch on what you mean by that?
Oh, heck yeah. So I'm going to tell you guys that when you submit an application, I tell you to do your due diligence, go on LinkedIn, search for the company that you are applying to, and check it out in the search bar. When that company comes up, it'll show you people who are associated with the company. I'm looking for hiring managers, recruiters, or even a team member who may be in the department that I'm looking to transition into. Send them a nice, pretty note on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is dope because people want to help. People want to communicate. So this is your opportunity to put your foot in the door and really make your presence felt. As of right now, once you submit your application, you're just a piece of paper. Once you make that note, whether you say, hey, and keep it straightforward, please. Don't ask me how my kids are. Don't ask me how my husband is. Nobody cares, unfortunately. Tell me, hey, I noticed that you work with this company. I just applied in this department. Can you give me some feedback or tips as to how I can better apply? And then that's when you open the floodgate, because we like to talk on LinkedIn. So if I know somebody in the department that's hiring with you or for you, I'm going to pass your resume along. Now, don't be surprised if you get ghosted and nobody responds. That's just a part of the game. Then you go and you find somebody else. So you have to be resilient in this process. Get on LinkedIn, send some messages, and follow up. I hope that helps.
Yes.
Okay.
And then Christy, I just wanted to really quickly mention a few things. I review a lot of resumes for clients that I have, and some simple things that I've noticed that drive me crazy, that I feel like it's self-explanatory, but it's not, because I keep still seeing it on resumes. If you're bilingual, please bold it, make it large. You speak whatever languages that you speak, because sometimes that is gonna be what puts you over the line, is they're literally looking for someone bilingual. So that's what's gonna make your resume stand out, is that you're bilingual. So if you're bilingual, please put it somewhere where I can see it, not in your job description. Like, put it bold at the top. Like, I saw a resume yesterday that said Spanish speaking. Also, when you're putting your experience in chronological order, put the most recent first. Don't put your job from 1999 first. And I know this should be self-explanatory, but I still see it on resumes. If you are in, like, you're a mental health therapist, that's what I'm actually recruiting for right now. But say you're doing something like that, but right now, because of COVID, maybe you're working at Pizza Hut or you're working at Target or something like that. You don't need to include that on your resume, because it's not relevant to the job. And especially right now, if there's current gaps in the market, I think people mostly understand that because of the huge unemployment. So if there was any time for a gap to be on the resume and people not question it, it's now. So if you are working a job, but it's not relevant to what you're actually doing, there's no need to include it on the job, because it literally just throws a recruiter off completely, like completely. I think that's it. The bilingual thing, though, was, especially if you don't have if you are Spanish or you're Asian and you don't have a name that is kind of reflective of that, we're going to assume you don't. And if you are bilingual, then it's like, oh my gosh, she's bilingual or he's bilingual. And it's just really, really, really important.
Thank you, Leonka. And you brought up a really good point, because we had a couple of questions from that, similar to that, from Chris, and I saw one come in about gaps in employment. So some of them have been health related, some of them have been just, world and stuff like that. So Dana, Michelle, Jessica, what if somebody's been out of work for a couple of years or longer, how do they address that on their resume?
Yeah, this is something I come upon a lot. It depends. First of all, something that can give you a little bit of flexibility is to take months off the resume. I had somebody yesterday who ended something in, it was August 2017, started something up in July 2018. Take off the dates and all of a sudden it doesn't look like that big a gap. I know often you have multiple years. Sometimes it's unavoidable, to be honest. The thing I'm going to say is you don't have to address it on the resume, and it's probably not, it may not be a good idea in some cases, but do expect it to come up in the interview. If you can put a footnote or something and it makes sense, maybe you traveled, maybe if you were training or did any kind of education, then that would be one of the cases when you do want to put the dates on education to show that it happened during that time frame. But one last thing I'll say is, gaps on a resume are not as much of a red flag as they maybe used to be, because look at what's happening now. I work with a lot of advertising creative folks where that's the nature of the industry. They jump from job to job. So it's not as much of a red flag as maybe it used to be to have a gap on the resume. Just be prepared to speak to it in the interview process.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, one thing is that we're kind of conditioned to feel that everyone has to have this linear, perfect career path, and almost no one does. I mean, that's the truth of it. If you haven't worked in a couple of years, if it's something, current that you're trying to get back into the workforce, I would encourage you to consider what you've done over the last couple of years. Again, this is a great place to integrate volunteer work. If you were a stay-at-home parent, did you volunteer at your child's school? Did you help with any fundraising? Did you help with any, educating? Right now, everyone, so many people are, doing homeschool. You could integrate that into your resume. Like I said, if it is current, I would encourage you to consider what you've done to include something fairly current on a resume, because, yes, everyone knows what's going on with COVID. However, if you have a job, your last career or your last position ended in, say, 2017, 2016, it is a possibility that someone may pass you up because you don't have a lot of current information. So I would say consider what you've done over the last few years, because you probably haven't sat there and just been twiddling your thumbs. You've probably done quite a bit. Even, again, it's outside of that traditional corporate experience, and that's okay. So, and then if it's something, just like Dana said, if it's something from years prior, and if you had a gap, 5-10 years ago, or, even a few years ago, but you've been working currently, I wouldn't really focus on it too much.
So just to add in, because both ladies hit the nail on the head, I actually did a pandemic snapshot. So these are for the people who are experiencing things during the pandemic. I had a client who was out of work, but he built different types of robotics for classes. I created a pandemic snapshot for him to showcase how many students he taught, what type of awesome nerdy things he did with these robots, because that is so out of my realm. But he wasn't just sitting there, like you said. He wasn't just sitting there, trying to figure out what his next move was. He got up, he got active, and he found a spot that he noticed people could use. So make sure you're not afraid to implement different things that you're doing that are relative. If you're out there making pizzas, tell me who you're feeding. Are you feeding the community? Tell me that. That way you can feel basically proud about what you've done and that you're not just at home chilling.
Totally.
We got a question from Christian. He graduated with a degree in film, but he's been working in a call center for the recent time, but he wants to leave that job to focus on his film industry career. He's done producing and certificate courses, but how does he incorporate his call center experience into his resume?
I mean, I would say that, kind of what I said before, your experience is your experience. You can list that on there if that's what you've been doing, but I would focus on, again, that skill set up at the top. And then I would also consider what you've been doing on the side, because if you've been doing side projects or personal projects, or you've been, creating your portfolio, you could frame it as a freelance, production consultant or something along those lines. And that can be your current like job title. That can be what headlines your resume. And then you put the call center experience underneath. Again, we work in we're in a society when people have 2 and 3 jobs, and it's unfortunate, but people have to have multiple jobs often to pay the bills, and no one's going to, shame you, or if they do, that's wrong, for wanting to pay your bills. I mean, you can't always make money doing what you love. So, I would just consider how you can incorporate these side projects and what you're doing. And again, even if you did, video editing for a friend's wedding or as a favor to someone, that's all stuff that you can put on there in a freelance capacity or in a consulting capacity, but make that look, that's what headlines your resume if that's the kind of position that you're looking for.
Look like you added something, Dana?
Oh, it's just in regard to an earlier question.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Putting the older positions on the resume.
Okay. So there was another question that, resume styles by industry. If you're a creative type, if you're a creative director or a designer, should your resume look different than a quote unquote traditional resume?
I would say yes, because now you're able to show your creative side. I'm not saying go crazy with the graphics, because I've seen some things that I probably almost got vertigo looking at, but you want to showcase your personality, your creative side, but make sure people can read it. That would be the only tip I have. It has to be readable.
Yeah. I mean, just by nature, think about, someone applying for a job in a hospital versus someone applying for a boutique marketing firm or an advertising firm. I mean, they're going to be different. Yeah.
I do a lot of work with creatives and advertising, so we often do look at the design a lot and what's over the top. Stay away from any unnecessary graphics, things that are going to get in the way of the ATS system. But you can, as I think Jessica mentioned earlier about adding a little bit of a pop of color, you can do that. It's acceptable in a lot of industries. And think of it too as it's your presentation. And if you're creative, if you have a portfolio, try to match up the branding, the color scheme if it's appropriate. Try to think about it more holistically as your overall presentation. You can get a little bit more creative. Just make sure, again, it's still easy to read and the information's not too creatively all over the place.
And that's such a good point. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Michelle.
I was going to say that's such a good point. If you're someone that has your own website or something like that, brand your resume to that. I mean, everything should be cohesive. So, I do a lot with personal branding. Every element that you're presenting about your personal brand, whether or not you are a service provider or if you're a photographer, whatever it is, your resume, if you're applying for a position, if someone's going to go to your website, I think that it's really beneficial to have your resume align with that. It doesn't have to be exact, but it should align with that so someone can see the flow and see consistent branding and consistent messaging.
And a question that was submitted earlier from Tracy was, is there a specific resume style to get into tech or a startup?
I'm thinking about this because they're not a specific type. I'm thinking about this because my husband is in tech. But again, keep it kind of concise, focus on, like anything else, focus on the impact of what you did. Definitely highlight the right skills, but be wary of like highlighting skills that maybe, are a little bit outdated too. But yeah, I have noticed with tech resumes that they just want to keep them very concise and just, here are my capabilities. You're not going to, in a lot of cases, you may not have a lot of metrics depending what you do in tech. But definitely very technology skill focused, but again, make sure that those skills are relevant and you're not just listing everything that might not be applicable to the job.
Yeah, I would say definitely software as well. I do a good amount of resumes in tech, and I have a lot of tech people that come to me and they go, oh, well, because of my job title, people assume that, like, everyone would assume reading my resume that I can do the software. That doesn't need to be included on my resume. Well, if they're looking for it in the job description, it doesn't mean that they don't assume that you have it based on your job. But if they're keyword searching and they're not necessarily looking at your job, you need to make sure that you have the right software. So I think that that's one thing really important. Don't assume anything. If they're asking for software and you have it, include it. Don't say, oh yeah, but they would know that I would have it, because the computer wouldn't assume things. The computer doesn't assume. The computer searches for terms.
And the same woman was asking, she's been in education for 20 years and she wants to get out of education. So what skills and how does she she wants to get back or get into the corporate world or startup or tech or something like that, how can she pull skills from an education background and present that in a resume to get into a completely different industry?
Again, go back, start with the role, getting one clear on the roles that you do want to go into, what within corporate specifically, what kind of industry, what kind of role. And then look at the overlap. What are they looking for that maybe you've done to some degree, even if it wasn't the main function of your job? Is it a leadership role? Is there trading involved? Is there presentations, direct, public speaking? It also depends what you did in education. But then again, look at where the skill gaps are and see what's missing. Is there a way for you to get that experience? But I would say first, look at the job description of kind of a target opportunity and see, what are the critical things and what are the overlaps between what you did in education and, what you want to do in tech or the other areas that, that you're targeting.
Patrick submitted a question today and before, so I know that this is important to him, so I want to make sure we get to it. And job titles. Different industries had different job titles. What happens if you had a VP and can you apply for a director title or a senior director? And are you going to be looked at as overly qualified, underly qualified? Does that become an issue? And does it look like he's desperate if he submits for a title that's lower than one he's had before?
I mean, I would say a couple of things on that, especially now. I mean, I think people are really putting into perspective what matters to them. So, your cover letter is a great opportunity to discuss why you're applying for the job you're applying for. It's a toss up whether someone's going to read it. But again, it's your opportunity to discuss why you want that specific position. So if you're applying for a lower position because you really care about the company, or because you feel very aligned with the mission, or because you know someone that has had a really great experience with work-life balance at the company, whatever that is, that's a great opportunity to include that information. But as far as job titles specifically, I mean, now there's so many people that have job titles that don't align with what they do, or that, that you can't really figure out what they do, especially with tech. I mean, they're like senior happiness advisor and it's an HR person, whatever it is. So I would say put the job title that you actually have or that you're applying for, like in parentheses. Like if your position is, your actual title is senior happiness advisor, whatever it is, if it's some out there title, but you're an HR generalist, then put in parentheses HR generalist or some, whatever that is. I think that you can add explanatory job titles into your resume, as long as you do have, you need to make sure that if they're going to go back and background check you, if you get far enough in the application, if you get offered, if they go back and ask what your job title was, you need to make sure that you can say, yes, this was my job title at this company. But there's always room to explain. And, again, no one has a perfect career path.
Agreed.
Sometimes you can tweak it on the resume too, if you have room. Say, if you're not executive director, can you say head of something instead? Or can you, again, kind of modify the title a little bit, depending upon what your function was.
See, we got a question about the career summary and an objective. So I think you're all going to say no objective, yes to the career summary.
Yes.
Yes.
And I have a question that I want. Format. Should people submit a Word document, PDF, something else?
I always say PDF because a Word document can lose its format. It will make the fonts funky. And if you have your resume formatted pretty, it's going to make it weird. So I always say PDF, but I'll see what the experts say.
I am a PDF. Oops, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say I'm a PDF kind of girl because some Word docs do get funky, like you mentioned, and they look weird. They may look bomb on your computer screen, but as soon as somebody else opens them, because we may have different programs, PDF all the way for me.
That's my first inclination too. I mean, the problem is that there are some applicant tracking systems that can't read PDFs as well. So you'll see a lot of content out there, that will say you need to submit a Word document. But again, it depends on what your resume looks like and the format of it. I mean, if you this is not necessarily the resume that I like to put forward, but if you have a very traditional, like no frills resume, then maybe you do want to submit a Word document, or you could upload the Word document and submit a PDF. But my first inclination is, even between Mac and PC and anything, I mean, if someone has Google Doc and they don't have Word or something like that, so many people don't have Microsoft Word now, that I would just say submit a PDF so that you know what they're looking at.
And I will just add, if they give you specific instructions of what type of document, follow it.
Yes.
Don't listen to us and follow what they say to do.
When in doubt, you can submit a plain text resume too. If you're submitting it through a website, sometimes that'll avoid any issues with formatting.
That's a great option. Yeah.
I know we are going over, but you guys are still hanging with us, and we're getting lots of questions. So I appreciate everybody's time and attention, including our panelists. Company I work for changed name since I left. Which name do I put on my resume? The old name or the new name?
That happened to me. I used to work when I worked there, it was Just Fab, but now it's Textile. I always just put Just Fab because that's where I work, but I'd be curious to see what everyone else says.
I put the new title. That's where I work right now. Sometimes I'll put it in the description underneath my work. Like, oh, it was previously this company, but I go with the new title because that's where I'm at.
I will do new title and then in parentheses previously something else. Just because, again, that way you hit on both the heads. If someone searches it, they'll come up, but things can change over the years or over time. So I think it is beneficial to include both.
Agree with Michelle. Adding it in parentheses. Also think about which company name is more well known. That might be one you want to emphasize, and then again say now X company or previously X company.
Yeah, I mean, it also. Point. Sorry.
No.
One thing it's interesting to consider is, for example, LinkedIn. LinkedIn has bought out several smaller, companies that did online learning. And so if you worked at the smaller company from the beginning and then they got acquired, I mean, I do think it's beneficial to include both of those, because then you can talk about how you transitioned and how you worked in a small, startup environment, and then you transitioned into a large scale corporate environment. So, it depends on what you want to highlight, but consider stuff like that too. It's always beneficial to have all that information on there.
My dad worked for, and this was in the, I guess, 80s, 90s. He worked for Hughes Aircraft. He was an engineer. So he worked for Hughes Aircraft, and then they were acquired or bought by Raytheon. So it was like this whole thing of, well, which one, do I pick? But now it's Raytheon. So he ended up using Raytheon, and that's where he ended up retiring from. But there was a huge transition because both were pretty much well known, but for most of his career, it was Hughes Aircraft. So.
We got a question about, Ryan asked about when they tell you to submit your resume and cover letter, and then you have to enter it again into the database. Should the information be distinguished between the two? I'm not sure I completely understand that. Hopefully somebody else on the panel does.
I'm assuming maybe they want I'm assuming he's asking maybe you have to upload the documents, typical, and then maybe you have to also fill out some kind of application online. Going back to what Christy said before, whatever they're asking you to do, just try to go with that, because it may be grounds for eliminating you right off the bat, given that there are so many applicants to begin with for a lot of roles. Just try to get as close to the directions, even if it is a little bit repetitive.
Yeah, it can be really frustrating. I know when my husband was applying for jobs, they often did that, where they'd ask for your resume and then they'd have you fill everything out, job title and everything. And it can be annoying, but at the end of the day, you have to do what they're asking, because if you don't, I mean, they're not going to take the time to look at you. And my hunch is that when they have you do that, it's probably something to do with, readability and scanning, so that they can ensure that you're copying and pasting the text from your resume into their system. They can scan it properly, and then they can look at the formatted document. Again, I'm not 100% sure the reasoning behind that, but that's my hunch.
So Christian asked about a cover letter. I'm going to take that one because we did cover that, Christian. But yes, we all believe that you should submit a cover letter, even if not everybody reads them. But for the people that do, it's very important that you include that. I do have a free resource. If you go to my website, christynoel.com, if you go to resources, I've got a complete guide to cover letters that'll take you through why it's important and how to write one, including some templates to help make it a little easier. And just like the cover letter or the resume, the cover letter, you both should customize both of those for every position. And I know everybody cringes, including myself, when we say that. Yes, it's a lot of work, but you do need to tailor your cover letter and your resume to the job position using the job description and the keywords and all the things that we've been talking about. But what I don't recommend or say, I'm not saying you have to start over on your cover letter and your resume each time. You're just going to have your standard versions of it. And then you tailor each of those to the job you're applying to. So you might change your keywords a little bit. You might change your job description to get more of those keywords into your job description, knowing what they're looking for. You might change your success metrics. Somebody's looking for somebody that does a lot of SEO. You might be, putting in more metrics related to SEO and taking some out that may have to do with email marketing or something like that. So you don't have to start from scratch, but you do need to tailor it. And again, you can go to christynoel.com and check on resources and grab my cover letter guide for free. Let's see, I think I want to close out pretty soon. I want to make sure we didn't get anything. Can you apply to the same company more than once?
I say yes. I mean, especially if it's different positions, you can always say, look, if you care about the company and you want to work for that company and you're okay with, adjusting the job slightly because you feel strongly and you feel really aligned with that company, okay. One thing that I would caution, just be aware, sometimes depending on how big the company is, there are different recruiters or different, account managers that handle the different job titles. So I have heard people say that they applied in different departments. They had different recruiters, and then the two recruiters at the company were kind of slightly competing. But again, that's not really a reason. If you care a lot about a company and you see that there are a couple of positions that you can do, that doesn't mean you shouldn't apply for both of them.
I totally agree.
Go ahead, Jessica.
Okay, I totally agree. I just would be cautious about, because sometimes I'll have people go and they'll apply for every position at that company. Be mindful. Definitely apply for the ones that you truly want, not just because you want to see who's going to pick you up. So be mindful, but definitely go for it if you see multiple positions that align with who you are, what you have to contribute. Just don't go easy, apply crazy.
And if you've applied, and if you've applied to the company 6 months ago, there's no reason not to try again if you see another position. Okay. I'm going to
be able to speak on it, I would say.
Going to do the last question because how long should the career summary be and where should it be placed on the resume, before or after your skills?
I would say at the top, and it should be no more than about 3 to 5 lines, bullet points, short paragraph. Again, just kind of real quick snapshot. Who are you? What have you done? What do you bring to the table? And then, that sets the stage for the rest of the resume. So pretty brief, and then right at the top of the resume.
Yep.
Anybody else? Okay. All right. I'm sorry if somehow we missed some of your questions, but I will take a look at them and see if there's anything we did not get to and see if we can address it individually or that through an email blast. Anyway, my books, if you want more information, are Your Personal Career Coach is a reference guide that you will go use throughout your career. It talks about interviewing, talks about resumes, it talks about getting the job, and then it talks a lot about what to do when you do get the job, working with teams, working with your boss and management and all that stuff. Your Career Survival Guide is a book for right now. Was written with COVID in mind. If you are trying to get back into the job market, if you lost your job, what do you do? It's a very short, quick guide to give you some great, straightforward advice to finding a job, uncovering opportunities, and then not just the resume, but includes a lot of that too. So, and they're available at all major retailers for books, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, independent books. So I hope you will pick one of those up. And if you do, I have a special offer right for everybody that's on this workshop with us today. If you buy your personal career coach in any format, ebook or paperback, I'll give you a free copy of your career survival guide in either paperback or ebook if you'd like, your choice. So just send me an email and with showing me that you purchased your career coach, and I'll send you your career survival guide in any format that you want. Okay, it's time for our drawing.
I'm
Actually,
ready.
I'm gonna come back to that because I want to make sure everybody gets the information of the panelists. So hopefully, if you want to reach out to Jessica, Michelle, or Dana, their information is in here. I highly encourage you to do that. If you do feel like you can't do your resume on your own and you need to get some professional help, as you can see, these ladies know their stuff and they're very talented, and they'd be very happy to work with you. And if you are looking for anything related to me, that you know how to find me, hopefully at this point, but if not, here's some more information. And we will send you the slide deck so you can get all of this information if it went too fast. And then now we'll go to the lucky winners of, let's do my books first. Leonka, if
Yep, I'm ready. So the first winner is Jamie Connolly.
Yay, Jamie.
And the second winner is Jim Williams. Oh, Jays.
And do we have their email addresses, or do we need to have them chat
if they
personally?
can send the email address directly to me, that would be great.
Okay. Congratulations, Jamie and Jim. I hope you enjoy the books. I hope they help you. And then drum roll for the big finale with a resume consult and review with Michelle Lando.
Denise, I don't have a last name.
All right, Denise.
But Denise is the winner. If she can send me her email address, that would be amazing.
Yes, and then we will put you in touch with Michelle. And again, thank you, Michelle, for providing that great incentive. And so with that, I think
Denise
we are
Froning.
Pardon?
Denise Froning, that's her last name.
Okay, Denise Froning. Great. Congratulations, Denise. I'm sure you are going to get a lot out of that. And thank you, everybody, for being here today and for staying with us over quite a bit over the time, but it was really good information. And I really appreciate Dana and Michelle and Jessica being here, and Leonka to share their expertise and their advice. I really hope it helps you and you can get that resume in shape and have great results for 2021, and at least get started hearing more interviews and callbacks. Then you'll know you're onto something. And you can continue to fine tune it and tweak it so that you can continue to hear back and hopefully land that great new job for 2021. Thank you all again. And please reach out to any of us if you have any questions, concerns, or require more information. And have a great day and a great weekend.
Thank you.